motion to go into
Pass that.
session.
Now we've already done that. Pass that to Shane. Okay, we're going to return into open session here, folks. Thanks for waiting so patiently. We have two items. We have two initial votes and then one discussion and then a vote. The first item, I'd like to make a motion that we reduce the student discipline of student A from permanent expulsion to a level 3 suspension with conditions as discussed by the board and finalized between council. We have support on that motion?
Support.
Support by Trustee St. John. Missing some, we're not missing. What's here? He's
Right,
gone.
so missing Trustee Brumbaugh.
Okay, we're missing Trustee Brumbaugh. Okay, is there any discussion on that? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Yes, no.
No. Okay, let me make a note of that. Mrs. Worden. No. Okay, next item, Mr. Cotton.
I move to accept the agreement with Dr. Dean covering all terms of his retirement from the district and to direct the board president to sign the agreement on behalf of the board.
Okay, do we have support?
Support.
Support by Mrs. Pappas. Any discussion?
I have some comments, Mr.
Okay.
President. I am vehemently opposed to this separation agreement. I think it's highly irresponsible for this board to let a highly effective and amazing superintendent who has served this district with grace and intelligence and dedication for 12 years, to let him go like this, to be driven out. And I'm absolutely opposed to it, especially, I'm not finished, 2 weeks before school. I just can't imagine the irresponsibility of this board to let him go. I also think that it's absolutely irresponsible, fiscally irresponsible, to pay a superintendent and pay him to leave when he has been deemed highly effective in each and every one of his ratings. He's well loved by teachers, administrators, students. He's been quite a fixture in this community, and I'm devastated to see him leave after everything that he's given to this district. He's smart, he's available 24 hours a day. I text him at 4 in the morning, I text him at midnight, responds immediately. He takes care of business in a timely fashion. We've had a top-notch school district, rated highly effective and rated highly in the state, top in the state under his leadership. And I think it's just a travesty that this board is letting him go and driving him out.
Okay, any other comments?
I have some comments too. I agree that it's fiscally irresponsible to pay a superintendent to leave and also have to pay potentially an external candidate to be our superintendent. I don't think it achieves the academic excellence that we supposedly want, because superintendents, when they, just anyone changing over, it doesn't matter how good of a superintendent we hire next, having that changeover and that transition dips academic achievement for the next 2 years. That's been statistically proven, so we are setting ourselves up for 2 years of more difficulty with the transition, which would be understandable if there were no other choice, but there were a lot of other options that we could have pursued. We could have tried to work with our superintendent more, and we chose not to. So I'm very disappointed that this is something that the board is even considering. That's all.
Could I have that source that you cited as far as the 2 years?
Yeah, I can send it.
Oh, I thought maybe you knew, okay.
No, I don't have it off.
If you could send it, that would be great. Okay, any other comments?
I have a question.
Yes.
What is this gonna do to our fund balance?
It's a negligible, I think it's, well, let's see. I'd have to have Mrs. Matheson get you the exact number.
Well, I mean, so it wasn't considered. She doesn't.
I think we know the exact number.
No, I'm talking about the exact change to the fund
Oh,
balance.
the percentage?
Percentage, I don't know that.
Well, I
off the
mean,
top of my head.
we can say that it's gonna be it's gonna be a big dent into our fund balance, but can we agree to that?
We can agree it's probably in the $200,000 range, I would guess.
Probably more, right?
I'm not saying that, you are.
it just seems to me in a time when, you know, we could have given this to our teachers. That's what makes me the maddest. We could have given this money to our teachers.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Okay, I'll take a roll call vote. Mrs. Worden?
No.
No. Mrs. St. John?
No.
Mr. Cotton?
Yes.
Mrs. Jeup?
Yes.
Mrs. Pappas?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay, so we've accepted Dr. Dean's agreement that he presented to us, and we'll move on from there. That takes those two items. The next item that is on our agenda is the review of the interim agreement that Mr. Chisholm sent us all. And as we've discussed, as I've advised you, I have reached out to, and as Dr. Dean's fully aware, because we worked together on this, I've reached out to MASB, I've reached out to MLI, I've provided you with documents from MASB, and there's an article I gave you from the MLI director, who's now the interim superintendent at Rochester Schools. I've also provided you with a email from Christian Fenton, who was our superintendent of finance here for 37 years. And he is willing to help us out as an interim effective September 1st. And what our goal, or what I would like to see us do, is to authorize Mr. Chisholm to make an agreement with Mr. Fenton to serve on a per diem basis as we're going through superintendent search based on Dr. Dean's per diem rate. And I'd like to know if we have support for that.
Support.
I have a question.
Second.
Go right ahead.
So this email is dated August 22nd. How did Chris Fenton know that we were looking for an interim superintendent and know to offer himself up as a potential candidate?
I talked to Mr. Fenton, and at Dr. Dean and I, as you well know, Dr. Dean gave us his signed agreement that he would like 7 days ago. And at that point, when Dr. Dean signed it, I asked him if he wouldn't mind if I reached out to potential interims, and he said he did not have a problem with that. And at that point, I reached out to Mr. Fenton. It's a logical choice. He lives in the community. He knows the system. And the fact that he was willing to help out, I thought was a major win for us.
Did you look at any internal candidates to hopefully save the district some money?
No, because frankly, somebody would have to take over what they're doing. So you're really not going to, if we pull a principal out of a school to be the superintendent, somebody's got to be that principal, and I didn't feel that was proper to disrupt. And the letters that we received from Jay Bennett from Michigan Association of School Boards confirmed that pulling an internal candidate was not the best resource.
Well, there's more to that, right? That is, you can consider an external candidate, but you can also consider the internal. And that's the next best choice, right? And you didn't consider that at all?
No, that wasn't the next best choice.
Considering someone that already works in the school system.
Well,
It said
the least favorable option would be a current staff member who would also be a candidate for permanent expulsion. The next best option is to appoint a current district employee who expresses no interest in permanent position. A good example would be a current administrator near retirement.
What I find to be so offensive about all of this is that you didn't reach out to me. I know that you met with the male members of the board to discuss who we should choose. You didn't reach out to me. I sent you several candidates who I thought might be internal candidates who I thought might be worthy. You didn't respond to me. And what I find to be so offensive about this is you wanted to conduct this in closed session, and we shouldn't be doing this at your behest. You are not the president of the world in this situation. We are a board of 7 people, and we should be considering candidates that maybe you consider, but maybe I might consider too, and have an open discussion about this at the board table. So here we are, we get out of closed session, we vote, you vote to agree to let Jon go, and then you decide right now in a motion without any discussion at this board whatsoever, not from any input from any member of this board, about who should be the next superintendent of the Grosse Pointe Public School System.
No, we're talking about an interim superintendent.
Right. This person, I'm assuming, is going to be the interim for the next 6 months, It's a pretty important position, and yet you didn't reach out and ask me, you didn't ask Valarie. I don't know who else you asked, but you certainly didn't respond to my email where I said, would you consider these internal candidates?
Did not respond to my email either, for the record.
And so, you know, it just seems to me, once again, it's another series of secret proceedings. You know, somebody's establishment where you talk about who you want and you don't talk about who the next superintendent's going to be for the next 6 or 7 months. Maybe your child isn't in the school, my kid is, and I think as an elected board member, I have the right to have an input and a discussion about who the next superintendent's gonna be. And without any discussion whatsoever at this board table, you make a motion to put Chris Fenton, who I really like, he's a great guy, in charge of this school system without any discussion, input from the public. The community is dying to make some recommendations and some suggestions, and you don't even give we have a lot of board members, or a lot of members here today of the public, and you're not even giving them any opportunity to give any input on the say of who the next superintendent's gonna be. It flies in the face of every open meeting act rule and regulation that there could possibly be, and I'm so highly offended by this.
Okay, anybody else?
I think we would be very lucky. We have to, by law, have a superintendent in place September 1st. I've seen this and been part of districts that had to, at this exact time period, replace the superintendent. This is normal practice. We have to quickly put somebody in place. We would be lucky to have Chris Fenton, and he was also our CFO. We named our Performing Arts Center after him. There is nobody that we could get on a moment's notice that has that much institutional knowledge and would, I think, very, very capably, intelligently lead our district. We have to put our students in our district first. We have to have somebody in place. So waiting around for another week so everybody can put their input in, we need to have somebody on the ground, boots on the ground, September 1st, by law. And we have a retired educator. It happened in a district that I worked in, and they brought in the previous superintendent when the superintendent was put on leave. This is common practice, and we have to put our students and our staff and our district operations first. He also happened to be the CFO, so he knows our books backwards and forwards. We are lucky. He's a gentleman, he is an intelligent man, a kind man, and he puts the students and the staff first. He will put the district first, and we will be lucky to have Chris Fenton.
Do you have the letter that you wrote?
Yes.
I think it'd help to read it.
Okay. Dear President Ismail, members of the Grosse Pointe Board of Education, I'm ready to express my strong interest in the possibility of serving as the interim superintendent. I've lived in the Grosse Pointe School District my entire life. My wife Grace and I graduated from Grosse Pointe South High School, and my children Hope, CJ, and Ian graduated from Grosse Pointe North High School. I attended the schools for 13 years and served as central administrator for 37 plus years, including a short stint as interim superintendent. I believe my experience and expertise would help in continuing the growth and progress of this fine school system. I'm a strong believer in this district. I'm proud of its achievements to date. Additionally, I appreciate the challenges the district currently faces. I recognize the importance of stability and continuity during this transitional period, especially as the 23-24 school year begins. As Deputy Superintendent for Business and Operations, I was involved in many strategic plans and educational goals, along with the hiring of critical staff positions. I'm committed to assisting the board in its search for a qualified and visionary leader for the district. I have been intricately involved in 2 previous superintendent searches, including meeting with staff and community members to gain their input. An objective would be to work closely with the board to provide steadfast leadership that ensures the effective functioning of the district while the search for a permanent superintendent takes place. While I've been away from the district for a while, I've remained involved with various committees and organizations through the community, including but not limited to the Full Circle Foundation. I also currently serve on the Grosse Pointe Woods Planning Commission. If I am hired as the interim, my intent would be to take leave or resign from these organizations so I could give my full attention to the tasks at hand in the district. I look forward to working with each of you if you choose to contract with me as the interim. My best to each of you as you continue to work for the students, families, and taxpayers of this fine school community. Christian Fenton.
I have a question about this email. So it's addressed to President Ismail and members of the Grosse Pointe Public School System Board of Education, but it was emailed only to you, and I'm sure he knows how to email the entire board. So is there a particular reason he chose to email only you?
I can't read his mind, I couldn't tell you that.
Okay.
Let me be clear, I think Chris Fenton's a great guy. I've enjoyed thoroughly working with him on the facilities committee. He has a lot to offer this district. My problem with this from day one is that it's been done behind closed door, and it's your decision and your decision only. You didn't consult with the members of the board, you didn't let the public hear about it. And that's the problem with all of the proceedings that have gone on for the last 8 months. It's one decision after the other where the public's not made aware of what's going on, where the rest of the board is not consulted, where we're not allowed to give our opinion. I mean, we have a candidate, when I haven't heard about any of the choices that were even offered. Or maybe you could have
Well,
listened
that's
to.
incorrect. That's very incorrect, because we talked about this at our last meeting.
No, you threw names out there. There's certain.
I didn't throw the names out, other board members did.
Well,
So don't talk about
I heard
that.
you say names,
Well,
and
it's incorrect, but go
well,
ahead.
I disagree, but
It's fine.
the thing is none of those names should have been discussed, period. It should have been an open session. Not one name should have been discussed. It was not the topic of our closed session. So it should have been at this board table when members of the public could come up and make their comments on it and hear what goes on before the board. Everything should be at the board table unless it's a topic of closed session, and an interim superintendent was not the topic of a closed session.
Okay. Anybody else?
I have another question. Can you explain why you ignored Trustee Worden's and my emails with suggestions for possible interim superintendent candidates, but chose to meet with Trustee Cotton and Trustee Brumbaugh in person to discuss the potential candidates?
Well, first of all, Trustee Cotton and Brumbaugh and I didn't go out to discuss the candidates. It came up as a topic of discussion. It was not the focus of the evening. Just as you may go out together and talk about things, we did the same thing. And Trustee Brumbaugh, in fact, told me that the discussion we had, he was gonna share with the two of you. And hopefully he did. I was assuming he did when we left that meeting. And I don't have anything else to really say about it.
So is there a reason that you didn't respond to our emails with suggestions and
No,
questions
no
about the
particular
process?
reason,
No particular reason?
no.
Okay. So again, my issue isn't with Chris Fenton at all. I've said from when we first found out that we might need an interim superintendent, I would be fine with anyone competent. I mean, it's an interim position and there's 80 plus superintendent vacancies across the state. We need to make sure that we have somebody. I'm gonna be happy with anyone pretty much. So that's not my issue at all. My issue, as has been since you became the board president, is with the process and the fact that you choose only to communicate with certain board members. So that's what I'm going on the record as saying is my main issue. It's nothing against Mr. Fenton. I'm sure will be in capable hands for the next few months of the school year, but it's a serious problem when you refuse to talk to at least 2 trustees.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Does anybody want to make a motion as far as what we do with this agreement?
Yes. I'll make a motion to direct President Ismail to contact Christopher Fenton, negotiate an agreement for interim superintendent at a rate not to exceed the rate of the current superintendent.
Support.
Is there support? Okay. Any discussion?
I'm fine with the agreement as written. It seems boilerplate, but I'm not comfortable with directing President Ismail to do anything on behalf of the board because we won't know about it.
Okay.
And
You want to direct?
And I agree with that. I think the boilerplate language is perfectly fine, and I think Chris Fenton is perfectly fine. I am vehemently opposed to the whole process. I can't vote for someone when there's not been any discussion by the board or any input from the public or any sort of discussion whatsoever at the board table about anybody else than who you chose.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay.
I do have one note about the no other comments. I think one of the main concerns that the public has with these meetings is that it seems as though the outcome is predetermined when 4 trustees have no comments and 2 or 3 trustees will vehemently oppose things, and then it's just voted on yes with no reasoning at all as to why this is the way to go. It gives the appearance that these decisions are being made beforehand, and 4 trustees are being told, this is how you need to vote, and don't say anything about it at the meeting.
I'd like to just respond to that because when we had the meeting to discuss Dr. Dean's leaving, immediately the first concern I had was for who's going to run, and the first thing that came out of my mouth is the 2 people that I knew personally, which was Christian Fenton and Dr. Suzanne Klein. I was here under their leadership. And they're both retired, and they did an amazing job running their district, and that was the first thing that hit my, can we get either one of these people? That was the first thing, and no one told me anything, how to vote. I've been a parent in this district for 20 years. These are 2 people I respect tremendously, and I said, we would be lucky to get one of these 2 people. So, and in barring that, let's look, what do we do? Do we go to Mashpee? Do we go to RISA? Those were all my concerns, how many people, where are we gonna look to find somebody at this late juncture? But the best person, and that's typical of the educational system, is to look for a retired person because they are not invested in getting the permanent job, and you have that interim, position in between with somebody with institutional knowledge. And I mean, Chris Fenton, there's nobody, and he lives, Dr. Suzanne Klein doesn't live close by, and I'm sure if she agreed to do it, she would make the drive. I think last I heard she lived in Ann Arbor. But Christian Fenton lives in the community. He's retired. Like he said, he's a graduate from the district. He's sent his kids through here. We've named the Performing Arts Center after him. He was our CFO. So, there's a tremendous amount of institutional knowledge in this person, and that was the first person that came to mind. In fact, I was absolutely jaw to the floor when he ran for the Board of Education actually in 2018 and wasn't elected, and I was actually shocked that people could pass over somebody with his kind of knowledge on the Board of Education. So I was pretty surprised. I was very supportive of his candidacy for this seat. And this is a short amount of time to have such a serious decision. And my concern is that we keep our operations running as smoothly as possible for our students, for our staff, for our district. And like I said, that was the first name that came up in my own head. So there's no one's telling me how to vote. And believe me, I think Trustee Cotton and my fellow trustees and President Ismail could probably tell you that I, have some very interesting conversations. Nobody tells me how to vote. And I have some very interesting opinions, and I get very invested in them. And I don't always agree with. There's no big agreement or plotting here. We are literally trying to make our district continue running as smoothly and as efficiently as we can for the good of everybody.
Well, Trustee Hattis, I agree with most of what you said, and I think I've always known you to vote how you think you should vote, and I respect that of you. But my issue is not that we wouldn't have come to the end run of having Christian Fenton. My problem is that we've decided this, and I think we went into open session 15 minutes ago, and we already have an interim superintendent. And I think it would have been very important for us to have a discussion around the board table, discuss certain candidates, and have the public hear the entire discussion about it. So I don't disagree with you, and maybe we would have ended up with Christian Fenton anyway. But deciding in 10 or 15 minutes about who we're gonna have for the interim, whether it's 2 months or 6 months, I think is a disservice to the public.
I appreciate hearing your reasoning though.
I'm very invested in, I think he's the best person for the job. And I was, like I said, the first name that came up my tongue, and Dr. Suzanne Klein, just because she's been gone longer and lives further away, but those were the 2 names that instantly came to my mind. And I would have said that regardless of who was on the board or who was the superintendent or whatever. They would have been my 2 first choices to come in. So.
I think it helps the public to hear everyone's reasoning.
Okay, anybody else? I'll give my reasoning. It's very simple. You couldn't find a better person to serve as interim. You have to have an interim September 1. You go through, when's our next board meeting?
Yeah, I know it's not.
Well, we have special meetings all the time, though, that's never been a
So we can have a
problem.
special meeting tomorrow and interview who? Who would you like to interview?
Well, the thing is what we should have done is schedule this prior to this. We should have gotten the contract done earlier, and we should have talked about this.
I can't get a contract done earlier. Dr. Dean is the one that drove all of that. I didn't drive that.
Okay. Well, at any rate, it's your job as board president to make sure that there's a healthy discussion about each and every topic that comes up, especially one that's this important. So to make this kind of quick, knee-jerk decision without having input from the public, I think is a disservice to the community.
One of my concerns too is I noticed that the Ann Arbor Public Schools have recently moved to eliminate their superintendent, but they did so at an open board meeting. They said they directed their legal counsel to begin negotiating a potential contract to terminate, or a potential negotiation to terminate the contract. And so that was done at an open meeting, that they were starting the process of eliminating their superintendent. Whereas, as far as I can tell from the billing statements, you made a call without all the trustees' knowledge to start that process or make negotiations. That's my understanding from the billing statements. There were a lot of phone calls made, of which I was not aware, at least. So at no point did we as a board in an open meeting, direct our legal counsel to start these negotiations with Dr. Dean. So, and even in Ann Arbor, they're being accused of lack of transparency. This is all too rushed. So they did that at an open meeting.
Well, it's a very different situation because Dr. Dean came to us with a proposal. We didn't go to him with a proposal. And that's a very different situation. We have an item on the floor for vote. Let's do a roll call vote. Mrs. Worden,
No.
Mrs. St. John,
So the proposal is the interim superintendent
That's
contract in this case?
Wait, is this just is this for the boilerplate, or is this to include?
this is
Kristen
for
Fenton?
Christian Fenton. You want to reread your motion?
No, I
please?
heard the motion, I just want to make sure that I have it clear. So this is the interim contract with Christian Fenton as part of the contract.
That's correct.
Correct.
Okay, so you're still a no,
I'm still a no,
and I know solely for the process.
Okay,
and me as well,
John is
solely
a
for the
no.
process.
okay, Mr. Cotton,
I'm a yes, based on this letter, based on his time, the finance committee, and based on recommendation by you, President.
okay. Mrs. Jeup,
I'm a yes.
okay, Mrs. Pappas,
Enthusiastic, yes.
okay. Okay, based on the advice that we got from the Michigan Association of School Boards and based on Mr. Fenton's relationship with the community, I'm also a yes.
I'd like to make a motion to open the floor for public comment, since there's probably a lot of feelings about this situation, and it seems like it would be a disservice to not allow the public to be heard, since they waited
Your
for.
support to that?
I support that.
Okay, do a roll call vote. Any comments or questions first? Okay. Mrs. Worden,
Yes.
Mrs. St. John,
Yes.
Mr. Cotton,
No.
Mrs. Jeup,
No.
Mrs. Pappas,
Before I say, because I am gonna be a no, I had an hour of sleep last night, my mother was in the hospital, that's why I wasn't at the public meeting last night. And I have been at work setting up my classroom, and I've been here since 4 o'clock without eating, so I'm gonna have to get no, I can't continue. I gotta get over to see my mother.
okay, I totally get it, I'm a no as well. Okay, any other business? Okay, meeting is adjourned.